for example, and we use the lecture chart from Professional Course Lesson 3, Level 0, communication is a relay or motion of a particle or a bit of some kind from, spot A to B. So it must, cross a distance, and thus there is some time lag in this action. It would be instantaneous were it not for the perception of some kind of barrier again, and in this case the barrier would be distance. So without a spatial distance, there would be no spot A or spot B, since the two would be completely indistinguishable and essentially the same spot. So in our experience of the universe, distance is one of those barriers, and also a necessary game mechanic or game condition in order for us to, again, have the presence of a game. So there's a systematic relationship between communication and proximity or closeness. And this is reflected in the degree of likingness, or what some might refer to as affinity, if you want to even be more technical about it. And that's whatever, the likingness, closeness, proximity that's shared between ourselves and other individuals or things. So, this is, again, an aspect of how we're treating distance. So what we like, we generally want to keep closer to us, and, the more we engage in true communication with someone, the more we can get to actually liking them, which then leads to coming into closer agreement with them, and then, leading into being further inclined to communicate with them. And so this just kind of goes round and round. So we're just describing a systematic tendency in this case, not an absolute, but these are there's factors of communication. And why don't we start a new chair? We call them the factors. So there are factors, and let's list them here. We got communication, likingness, and agreement. Can you see that okay, baby? Communication, likingness, and agreement. So, yes, communication, likingness, agreement. Three factors. And they are interconnected, just like I was describing. And this is how an area, initially we're treating or handling an area of barriers in systematic processing. What is fragmentation, but essentially an energetic mass? And what is an energetic mass? It's an otherwise, clear flow or current, but it's, in the current, but it becomes a barrier to what would be a clear flow. So for training and demonstration purposes, it would be helpful to kind of imagine these three factors as a current flow or a channel that's connected between all individuals and all things in existence. So now the degree or the type or the intensity of these flows will tend to kind of rise and fall collectively. Individuals communicate, they like each other, and they agree with each other, or else they break, reject, or otherwise kind of wall up against the same. So it's true that, at one point we may initially have good reason for establishing breaks and barriers, but these all have a relationship, and the factors kind of show us what we should target and be concerned with. So this means that by by cutting communication, one then deals with dislike and then disagreement. And there's the, potential for, again, the automatic or compulsive continuation of like a break or a barrier to be maintained compulsively and so forth continuously thereafter, unknowingly. So, more important is the fact that when the event or the incident that prompted the break is not properly confronted as it is, then the fragmentation ensues. So, a lot of times it's not just the turbulent emotional and mental charge in a lot of areas is not just as a result of what's happened to us, but the fact that we're so unwilling to confront and handle what it is, the nature of what it is as it is. And so it builds up this chain of fragmentation, and this connects with other incidents and other reactive responses, and then considerations that one individual will make about life and reality and themselves as a result of this, and still think that they're making those still think they're thinking for themselves, even though it's basically a collective result of all this other stuff. Okay, we're back from the break. We have get back to where we were on the factors here. Still working on level 3. And professional course lesson 7. Still working out of, because lessons 1 through 8 are in Pathway to Ascension Volume 1. Still working out of Volume 1. And Eliminating Barriers is the name of our lesson. You can get it as the standalone professional course booklet number 7. So, So, now we're talking about the factors, and this is important because the factors, this is another aspect that reoccurs. We return to this concept and handle it all throughout the pathway. So we're starting to get to stuff that really it sticks with us pretty significantly as we work up the pathway. So now there's other ways in which like the incidents build up these chains of fragmentation when there's breaks in these flow factors. Remember, these are being treated as flows. So we sometimes, well, we'll just put this here in parentheses. These are, factors of flow that are connected between us and anything that we're having an experience of or anything that's in existence. So now, an individual that's often had their affections, and here we mean liking this, rejected is likely to be more emotionally sensitive in that area, or more turbulently reactive at even the most subtle indications of, for example, rejection in the future. So our systematic solution is to handle the considerations from earlier rejections, which is where the primary fragmentation or upset is actually stemming from. Breaks and barriers in other, in any of the flow factors, they can occur from enforcement too. In addition to rejection, they can occur as a result of enforcement. So rather than inhibiting or rejecting, enforcement would be like having too much of something. And in most cases when we're talking about tolerance or what's desirable or wanted, too much of something can be often just as uncomfortable as its absence. So this includes anytime too much force is applied to any of the flow factors, such as being forced to agree or forced to like something or so forth. Quickly, what happens is we'll end up shutting down the communication flows and then strongly disliking what it is and then, disagreeing with it and then just kind of building upon this on a cycle. So again, just like in other areas of systematic processing, we're not concerned with ultimately what an individual decides to like or not like. We're not trying to impress that, on a particular opinion. We're trying to show on which how these considerations systematically develop undo any of the fragmentation, which is the considerations that one's still operating under reality agreements that, that they're not aware of. and be able to actually make, such choices clearly. So, we say this type of fragmentation occurs on a chain that's connected to, many incidents. It's not just the one that's triggering it or re-stimulating the reaction in present time. Usually the reaction that, you end up, the dramatic reaction that takes place, when it's triggered is usually out of proportion with kind of the actual scenario that's taking place present, because it's a much more significant incident farther, back in the past, either this lifetime or on the backtrack of past lives, that one is still actually reacting to when that area gets stimulated. So this is, by not handling this kind of stuff, by just allowing ourselves to run on automatic and become, the effect of all these things, this is what keeps us down and keeps us actually progressively, getting worse, even in subsequent lifetimes. There's this illusion that, suddenly, when we're free of the body, that suddenly we've become free of all the attachments and all the reality agreements and everything we've made to these conditions and this universe and this planet or whatever level we're at, and that's not been found to be the case. So, ascension is not just a given. It's not just something that's going to just naturally happen on its own. It's actually a course, a direction, a journey, a pathway that has to be, charted and intentionally taken. I don't know really that anyone's just happened or stumbled upon just by accident. So what we basically, when you talk about handling things, sometimes with the preliminary runs through the pathway or the processing levels, we're just basically softening things up or slowing, quieting the turbulence enough to actually handle and treat things. Generally, the total defragmentation wouldn't take place until, that entire chain has been removed. So we again just kind of work at it incrementally and get a person to be able to handle that which is, right in front of them, and then kind of, dig a little deeper beneath the surface to realize why that was so detrimental or seemed so significant or has caused such a reaction. Usually, outside of self-determinism, an individual can become angry, but if various things, just all of a sudden incite that just on an automatic, then obviously the individual isn't really in control of that emotion. So, again, there you have it. It's all about that, handling the control of that emotion. So, any of these type of upsets, now there's all kinds of various methods and systematic processes and things that can be done, but really the underlying goal there are all to basically just spot the underlying source of fragmentation that's been resurfaced or that's currently in restimulation. And just by being able to spot it, this increases the actualized awareness in the area that one is, while one is upset. So, as opposed to trying to get someone to calm down and to, fully suppress whatever it is, by being able to actually spot, underlying sources, not necessarily that which just took place, it has the ability, again, to kind of take the focus, off of compulsively being on that which was the source of the immediate trigger of the anger. So any kind of systematic processing in these areas, it's most effective when the earliest incident of a certain type of occurrence can be spotted. And so for the first pass through these lessons, we're really just focusing on what's accessible, available, generally what's, happened during this lifetime. Unless additional data, already is available or is presenting itself, we're not trying to suppress or limit one's first pass or beta defragmentation, preliminaries just to this lifetime. It's just we don't generally focus or impress it until it just kind of naturally emerges, or until an individual starts getting more involved in to the levels of alpha defragmentation. So, because that's when we start treating processing on the entire backtrack. Now, when we're talking about defragmenting the factors, we have to, this is the method in which we're treating the eliminating barriers. So this requires defragmenting communication, likingness, and agreement, which would be those that channel between us and whatever it is that we're trying to defragment. And then let's consider that there's also various flow types attached to that. So now we mentioned previously about enforcement, which would be like the insistence upon, applying too much force, and then the rejection or the inhibition or the withholding from. So let's put those up there. We'll call them enforced and inhibited. So these would be two that would kind of cross with, we have enforced communication and inhibited communication, enforced likingness, inhibited likingness. That would kind of cross with that. So we brought that up. And then, so we have your textbook in lesson 7, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. There's a lot of combinations here of how to process, defragment the factors, and it includes, we're also going to include the two flow types, two additional kind of flow types. This would be more about intention or our direction we have. We have also inflow and outflow, and that's from the perspective of self. So, or rather the backwards on this one. Should be the outflow. We generally do, this would be your circuit 1, this would be your circuit 2. I'm used to doing that outwardly. So now these would be another set of factors, or not factors rather, these are the factors, another set of flow types that are processed out. So let me give you kind of a, when you combine them sequentially, it makes more sense again using this out of the book, working from the book, getting the actual processing in, and rather than just the explanation here. So for example, the first factor we start with communication, and it's 3 PCLs that regard enforced outflow. Then we also have ones that regard 3, the next process being 3 that regard enforced inflow, still regarding communication. So each one of these combinations composes a cycle of 3 PCL. And just to give an example, so if we're doing, we'll just kind of mark it up there so we're keeping track of what I'm talking about. So communication, enforced outflow. So we got communication and enforced and outflow. Okay, that would run kind of like this. On PCL number 1, recall a time when you insisted that someone communicate with someone or something. So communication, you insisted, because you insisted, it's an outflow, insisted. Recall a time when someone insisted that you communicate with someone or something, and recall a time when someone insisted others communicate with someone or something. So now let's take the next one as an example, communication, enforced inflow. So communication, still enforced, this time we'll do the inflow. Recall a time when you insisted that someone communicate with you. Recall a time when someone insisted that you communicate with them. Recall a time when someone insisted that others communicate with them. And so now to see the other side of this, we'll look at communication, inhibited, and outflow. Recall a time when you insisted that someone not communicate with someone or something. Then recall a time when someone insisted that you not communicate with someone or something, and recall a time when someone insisted that others not communicate with someone or something. And we do this again. We go through the flows. This really isn't great to do, as part of a lecture. So, I mean, there's several pages of arrangements that concern, liking this, and then, enforced outflows, you insisting that someone likes something, enforced inflows, someone insists that, you like them, all kinds of these combinations, and working this out systematically, defragmenting. And again, when we're talking about recall, from the very beginning in level 0, we talked about analytical recall and that kind of subjective processing. That's what you're applying to this. You're not just recalling it and recalling, oh, yep, that was the time, that was, spot, notice, do some actual processing analytically, hence analytical recall. Okay, so very early on the backtrack, we approached existence from a much more all-pervading and all-knowing state. But of course, that didn't offer us much room for experience, to experience any kind of game condition. So to have some genuine sense of interest or curiosity in our lives, it was necessary for us to first agree to not know at least something about something. So where it comes to our encounters in this present shared game universe, the not knowing is what allows the original barriers to exist. The agreed upon barriers defined, for example, by an individual's own mind or a wall restrict the apparent allness that could be potentially experienced or known. These barriers only exist, of course, within the reality of the game or universe. They're not actual conditions, not actual. That's why we call actual, alpha, actualized. No, they're beta conditions, they're game conditions. So most of the time, the upsets and imbalances that affect us in our daily lives come from the perception that there are too many factor breaks and barriers, and that an individual can also become inhibited or antagonistic or bored by not having enough randomness. So again, the idea of for a happy, healthy life, it's comprised of basically just enough game for one's own tolerance, and of course, increasing that tolerance is what is really desirable when we're talking about a pathway to ascension. So we often approach the game of life then from some degree of not knowing, and our attention is then directed by interest or curiosity, and this generates an energy flow, such as what we've kind of been talking about here with the factors and the flow types, and even earlier about the circuits and so forth, all of the channels of communication and agreement that plays out between us and basically the game and all of its elements. So now obviously this universe is not built on or upon or with self-honesty. So fragmentation runs rampant in your typical human experience. And oftentimes an individual does not fully even connect with with the experience, with their reality. And this is one of the flaws, that kind of resistance to things being what they are is one of the flaws to some of the earlier spiritual mystical methods in trying to overcome a universe or escape the human condition or rise above, because they didn't believe in the thing that they were trying. They didn't believe in the existence, or certainly not understand the thing they were trying to rise above from. And so it didn't work. So now, when an individual starts to apply energy against energy and force against force, they begin to engage with further barriers and more solid game conditions. For example, like we were talking about interest and curiosity, whether it's in someone or something, if it's inhibited, it promotes an increased desire for the thing, and a more impactful or solid, like energetic or material effort has to be involved within, with its attainment and so forth. It becomes a more solid and more physical thing. So, any further fragmentation or any break within the flows makes the conditions of the game seem more solid, makes barriers more solid than they are. So defragmentation of barriers is, essentially the underlying principle between all of what systematic processing is doing. And here we're actually systematically targeting the energetic flow factors in which fragmentation occurs. So once an individual starts reactively operating on fragmentation, their efforts generally become more unsuccessful. So because they're more intensely fixed in applying, they want something that's, an ultimate or an absolute or something that seems unattainable. And again, we talked before about the idea of scarcity and whatnot. That becomes part of the game condition because, another aspect of the game, we talked about goals and purposes. Well, it's the perceived rewards. So, and the more scarce those are meant to, perceive to be, of course, the harder one is going to kind of create or, experience a game in which to obtain them. So, and again, these things, they become really highly charged. Being free of, these highly charged areas don't just disappear when one, for example, ends this particular lifetime with the body. They go along with them. So, and then there's the idea about trying to get away or keep things away. That's intensively compulsive connections that actually, the more there is a thing there to be, trying to be kept away from, again, it's validating the existence of the thing there and all of the considerations about it. This all again works within it's an interplay of systems, and that's the only thing. Only by understanding it in that way could we ever have hoped to have the understanding of, for example, life universes and everything, that which could, otherwise has never been truly understood, because it's only otherwise been understood in fragmentation by one or another paradigm or one specific aspect or another in exclusion. Never was going to see the wholeness for what it was. So rather than confronting a thing as it is, the typical reactive response to getting away from something that is highly charged or undesirable is to try to make nothing of it, or to treat it as if it were not a thing. And we were actually talking about that with the mystics and reality. So it's no longer experienced as it is, and yet there's still a flow to the thing, and the individual starts furiously rejecting the thing, and and then there's the point where it just, almost angrily doesn't even want it anymore, and it just becomes, and this can happen too as something that was even formerly desired. So again, flow factor breaks, something you actually wanted when everything happened, was kept from you too long, pushed against, forced upon, taken from, any kind of this forms fragmentation, and thereafter you're thinking that you have a clear experience of what it was and choice and all that kind of stuff and making decisions about matters, and when it's actually been kind of released from your control because you set it on automatic and allowed, this kind of sequence of things to kind of control those considerations for you. So by treating things as a game and understanding it that way, also an individual will have a better understanding as taking the player perspective of just how much participation is actually involved with the experience of life, and therefore hopefully take more control and responsibility for that. So now, of course, when we talked about this not know, the alpha spirit decides to not know something in order to have a game. So, the application of attention and interest or curiosity is what essentially provides one with something to do or to be in order to experience it or to have something in existence. It provides enough randomness for one to basically enjoy their life. But if this isn't handled properly, or the player is not operating clearly in self-honesty, then they're just succumbing to the level of intense desire. And this just imposes further, again, fragmentation and barriers. So when not handled properly, obviously, life just becomes even more, cumulatively difficult to manage. So we try and just tear it apart systematically, bit by bit, and with processing. So when we talk about, the flows, we talk about, in fragmentation, a lot of times we talk about breaks, breaks in agreement, communication breaks, We don't usually say that so much with liking this, but usually, again, these kind of work together. So when we stop communicating with people because we stop liking them or we don't agree with them anymore, so we stop, it's just, those all work together. It's just basically a break. And of course, a break, if we talk about, as opposed to, fragmentation as a barrier being an energetic mass that's accumulated, a break in the flow also is going to be an inconsistent flow. And chances are there's, we talked about problems, things on either side of the problem. Chances are there's pressures building up on either side of this too. So here we have like your general fragmentation. Here we have, the type of human problems associated with what takes place when all of this is out of alignment. So, for solo processing, because again, we're trying to treat a little bit more of this as opposed to previous flight school education piloting, we're trying to cater a little bit more to the solo pilot and solo processing in this particular course. So how one might kind of approach this is just to look over the incident or occurrence carefully, and again, spotting, confronting whatever is accessible. And this just kind of also makes fragmentation available for processing, because again, part of confronting is bringing things up to the surface. We can't defragment something that an individual isn't looking at, isn't able to see, isn't understanding or whatnot. So, the first step is really seeing what is, and not focusing on the confusions or other unresolved parts of the experience, and just focusing on what is. Now, generally, the flow factor breaks or upsets, they're systematically processed when a seeker is distanced from the actual situation that's triggering anything, or that might bring it, restimulate it into existence. So this type of processing, and the reason it's only introduced, although we've talked about circuits before and this could have been introduced in other areas, we systematically placed it here because prior to level 3, generally an individual doesn't have enough accumulated actualized awareness and presence in session accessible to just kind of treat these things head on and not just kind of swamped up with them. And because our goal isn't to just emotionally stir things up and charge things up, although part of that, and this is not, it's not typical, but it's not untypical of processing sessions, that an individual actually does go through a period of dramatizing the experience or having certain reactions that have not been previously dealt with, which is why we don't treat handling past incidents directly and confronting the past until level 4. So we're stepping up to that because, especially if you're handling this as a solo pilot, it was really that handling, confronting the past incident stuff that co-piloting was that's where Systemology started. Most of your Tablets of Destiny Revelation volume, where the idea behind piloting and processing originated, actually includes basically the entire thing is dedicated to confronting past issues.
The Joshua Free Imprint, JFI Publications, in conjunction with Mardukite Academy and the Systemology Society, present the single greatest breakthrough of the 21st century for all humanity, the perfection of a new standard systemology, a complete map for the way out from the bottom to the top, and your key to being an ascended master in this lifetime. Everything you need is contained in 3 progressive, self-guiding courses: the Fundamentals of Systemology Basic Course, the Pathway to Ascension Professional Course, and the Keys to the Kingdom Advanced Training Course. And each should be studied and applied in their intended sequence and order as displayed in this video. All 3 courses combined are available as 5 standard hardcover volumes, but also as 33 installments, since each single course lesson is also available individually as a pocket-sized manual. The Fundamentals of Systemology basic course includes Being More Than Human, Realities in Agreement, Windows to Experience, Ancient Systemology, A History of Systemology, and Systemology Processing. The Pathway to Ascension professional course, including processing levels 0 through 6, includes in Volume 1, Increasing Awareness, Thought and Emotion, Clear Communication, Handling Humanity, Free Your Spirit, Escaping Spirit Traps, Eliminating Barriers, and Conquest of Illusion. The Pathway to Ascension Volume 2 includes Confronting the Past, Lifting the Veils, Spiritual Implants, Games and Universes, Spiritual Energy, Spiritual Machinery, The Arcs of Infinity, and Alpha Thought. The Keys to the Kingdom AT Advanced Training Course for Processing Level 7 in Volume 1 includes The Secret of Universes, Games, Goals, and Purposes, The Jewel of Knowledge, Implanted Universes, and the supplementals Systemology Biofeedback and Systemology Procedures. The Keys to the Kingdom AT Advanced Training Course for Processing Level 8 in Volume 2 includes Entities and Fragments, Spiritual Perception, Mastering Ascension, Advancing Systemology, and the AT Supplement Systemology Piloting. All titles are available from your favorite bookseller. Explore new standard Systemology today, and may you never be the same.